Be careful what you speak over yourself and what you speak over others. The Bible makes it very clear that there is power in the tongue. In Proverbs it says the power of life and death is in the tongue. And even from the very beginning, God is trying to show us that there is power in what we say. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. In the book of Proverbs it says the power of life and death is in the tongue. And it also tells us to guard our hearts above all else, for it determines the course of our life. And in James chapter 3 it compares the tongue to a rudder of a ship, which determines the course of a ship. See, Jesus tells us that an evil person out of the evil treasure of his heart will bring forth evil, but a good person out of the good treasure of his heart will bring forth good. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak. See, there is this interconnectedness when it comes to the heart and the tongue. And God tells us that he wants to remove from us our stony, stubborn heart and give us a heart of flesh. And with a new heart comes a new tongue. We have to learn how to bridle this tongue of ours, as if putting bits in our mouth and letting God take control, in the same way that you would put a bit in a horse's mouth and take control. See, God tells us that if we keep our mouths far away from perverse speech and from vulgar language, that he will make us a mouthpiece. See, God wants to use us as a vessel, but as long as we're being a vessel for the enemy, it's going to be difficult for God to be able to speak through us. In the same way that a flute being played by the right person will produce a beautiful sound, if that flute is being played by the wrong person, it's just going to sound like noise. And if that flute is stuffed full of dirt, it's not going to produce much sound at all. It's definitely not going to sound pleasant. See, we are instruments of the Most High, and he wants to bring out of us pleasant sounds, words that speak life instead of death. See, the Bible tells us that every creature of the earth has been tamed, but one thing that has not been tamed is the tongue. It is full of restless evils, and this mouth of ours could be an open grave. So once again, let's make sure that we are speaking life, and that we are not speaking death. That there is no vulgar language, that there is no coarse joking, but thanksgiving and praise. Because from the small spark of the tongue, a wild forest fire can go ablaze. Let's make sure that we are not speaking harshly about one another, and that we are not slandering one another, but that we may be giving good report, and that we may uplift one another. And let's make sure that we are not being a vessel for the adversary and the accuser, but that we are being a vessel for the Prince of Peace and the Most High God. There is power in your tongue. Use it wisely.